My name is Esther Ann. I work for the Catherine Cutler Institute at the University of Southern Maine, and I work with the Capacity Building Center for Tribes. And welcome to this first of 3 webinars in this series. This one is titled Tribal Child Welfare Data System Procurement Webinar Series. And this part 1 is planning for a new data system. And I'm going to just be welcoming everyone today. I'm going to go over some housekeeping items first and then introduce you to our panelists. So there is a worksheet available for your reference during today's webinar. This is a Zoom webinar and participants are automatically muted. Participants cannot see other participants. You can share your name and where you're joining us from in the chat so we can have some more connection with each other. The webinar is being recorded. It will be available on the Capacity Building Center for Tribes YouTube channel and the Tribal Information Exchange next week. If you have any questions, you can use the chat or the Q&A feature, and you can ask questions anonymously. Today our team, we have a wonderful group of folks today. I'll just read their names. You can read their where they're from underneath on the screen. We have Kimberly Kirchner, Summer Perdom, Cheryl Montoya, Lisa Leonard, David Baker, Marnina Evans, Sarah Nelson, Jared Lank, and we also have Melissa McGee with us today. Folks are here for support, tech support, monitoring the Q&A, and then we have our panelists as well. All right. Thank you. We'll be doing some poll questions throughout the webinar, and this is the first one. You'll see a screen pop up, and you can answer these following questions. What is your role in tribal child welfare? And have you participated in planning for a data system before? Right, we've got some responses coming in. Right. All right. Thank you. Sure. So we have our results in 100% answered. It looks like state federal support, 31%. What is your role in tribal child welfare? Administrative support, 9%. Data and technology, 20%. 11% of the folks here are manager or director, and 11% are worker direct service, and 17% are other. Question 2, have you participated in planning for a data system before? 40-60, no is 60 and yes is 40. So that's a good ratio to have for learning today. If you'd also share in the chat, what are some challenges you anticipate when planning for a new data system? And you can put that make sure when you put it in the chat, you hit to send it to everyone so everyone can see it and not just the hosts and panelists. All right, we have some answers coming in. Budget of states, funding source, lack of prior records and funding, cost and infrastructure, funding for my programs. Will all entities supporting the data system be involved? Oh, they're coming in fast now, faster than I can read. Readiness and bandwidth. Funding comes up a lot. Determine and define scope, interfaces, and data conversion. Standardization. Unique processes for tribes. All right. And please, the next question, please share what is the most exciting thing about getting a new data system? Share an info across the board. Supporting those engaged in families, meaningful data to support better outcomes, improved outcomes, exciting, the possibilities for improvement, scary, program adopting the possibilities.
Yeah.
Great. Organization, information sharing, and meet and report requirements. Data sovereignty for tribes. User-friendly managing data collections, organization of reports, meeting report requirements. Organizational structure. All right. In the chat is the worksheet. There's a link to the worksheet in the chat.
All right. These are some really great answers. Thank you all for participating in the chat. So the way that we're going to kind of talk today is more of a conversation. So the worksheet that was put into the chat is kind of a takeaway worksheet for you to be able to take. We know that everybody's at different phases, as the chat, the poll showed. You know, some of you have not engaged in planning for a new data system, and some of you have experience. What our hope is that this worksheet will help if you need to start planning for a new data system, or even if you are experienced, as just kind of a checklist to take away and to use in future planning. So we're going to kind of be going through that worksheet question by question, and we have Summer and Kimberly here. They both have experience with planning for a new data system. So we're going to ask the questions and then they'll answer. And if at any time, you know, you have something that you want to add or contribute to the conversation, because we're really interested in your perspective as well and the experience that you have, please feel free to drop that in the chat, any questions you might have, and we'll share that with the group. But we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start with question number 1, and I will direct that question to Kimberly first. So the first part is, how do you get started? Who needs to be at the table and when? Who benefits from the system, and who is financially invested in the building of the system?
So let me say first that I am not an expert, although I do have a lot of expertise in doing this. I've changed data systems 5 times over my career, so I do know what goes into it, and it is a lot of work, and it may seem very daunting if you don't have a data system or if you're thinking about changing data systems. So the first thing to think about, as we have on the sheet, and hopefully you'll use that worksheet as we're going along to make notes for yourself about who would I invite to the table, because there are a lot of stakeholders actually when thinking about a new data system or changing data systems. So obviously you've got your workers, your child welfare workers, or your family services workers, whatever you call your department. That seems obvious. You also have to buy-in, though, from folks in IT. And you need, because they are the folks who are going to tell you whether this can be on your server, whether it's saved in the cloud, and how it works, and can it be amended, and all those things that I have a little bit of knowledge about, probably enough to be dangerous. And also thinking about your administration. In larger tribes, that administration can be, multiple levels of different people. So you could have your executive director, you could have your tribal council. There may be a committee devoted to data procurement, data system procurement, or how you hold those things. And it could also be other departments. So at Kenaitze, we have a data system that we use that also is used by our tribal enrollment, by our housing department, by our tribal court, and other departments. So thinking about buying a system, unfortunately, you may not get a one size fits all, but something where you want to store all of your data. So thinking about who could benefit from that system, and thinking across the entire tribe, because it may not just be your department. We have social services who uses our database as well. And all of those individuals need to understand what the cost is and what the process is going to be. And you want those individuals to be at the beginning part of the process. The main thing is to identify it. Maybe it's by departments, depending on how big your tribe is, or it may be individuals. And you also want to identify key people, contacts in those departments, because you're going to need to move sometimes very quickly with things, and we need an answer now. And you need to identify those individuals and get them to the table. It's very important to have buy-in. I don't really like that word, but having the input from everybody is important, because you don't want to get 6 months, 2 years down the road and somebody in finance says, wait a minute, why did we pay $100,000 for this system? I'm not saying all systems cost that much, but typically it's a large chunk of your budget, and you don't want someone questioning that years down the road. And it's important that the entire department, like your finance department or your IT department, has at least an idea of what's going on, because the other big thing that we face, I'm sure most of us do, is staff turnover. And that we face a lot of at Kenaitze. So you want to make sure you have people at the table who can track what's going on as well.
All right, thank you. Summer?
I just want to place emphasis on some of the things that Kimberly said, especially on, having that point of contact in each department is very important. And future thinking when you're thinking about your database system. What are some of the things that these different areas within your tribe are wanting to accomplish? At Cherokee Nation, we knew that we were wanting to implement a data management system that would also work for our TANF program, which wasn't housed within child welfare. And so we were future thinking into what that would look like and what systems would accomplish that for us. And then making sure, especially making sure that you set up a system for how are we going to meet? How are we all going to stay up to date on what's going on? And who are those key, for those last minute or urgent decisions? Who are those key players? Who are those people that we can contact immediately to get a decision to allow us to continue to move forward? And then really asking those questions and really getting your IT department involved is important, because you have to think not only what data management system that you're going to use, but where is that information going to be housed? What type of licenses might be needed later down the road once you purchase the data management system? Is IT going to, they need to be on board from the beginning so that they know how to, if something goes wrong with the system, who are their points of contact? Do they contact the data management system? Do they keep that within the tribe and operate that way? And so there are just certain things that have to be continually thought out through the process. So although it's the beginning, it's the how do we get started? Also continuing to think of that future goal of what you want that to look like in the long run, and making sure that you keep those pertinent points of contact involved throughout the entirety of the project.
I would also
Absolutely.
add to, I would also add to that it would be important to have regular meetings with those individuals as well. Summer kind of alluded to that, to keep everybody aware of what's going on. Because if you start this process, say now in December, and you don't meet with these individuals until July of next year, that is too long. People will forget, they won't think about it. You'll have staff changeover. So it's really important to meet regularly with individuals. And if the point person, for example, say in finance isn't available, who is their designee? Like who's the person who's going to show up in their stead to take the notes and put in the relevant information? Because I can't imagine any one person making all of these decisions about what the need is and where it's going to be housed and who's going to be doing what. There's going to have to be at least 3 or 4 people there who have the expertise to be able to do that.
All right, thank you. Just to add a couple more thoughts, you also at this point might want to decide if you're going to have any type of external portal for like foster parents or providers or possibly youth or anyone who isn't like part of the state agency who will be interacting from the outside. And if you are going to try to have something like that or mandated reporters or something, then you want to bring those people to the table as well early on to understand what their needs are too. But a lot of great information. Okay, the next question is, if you're working on Direct 4E, when do you start the process? Summer, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. Immediately. End of answer. As soon as you decide to start working on Direct Title 4, you should start considering data management systems, what you want them to look like, what you want them to do for your agency, and start reaching out to those people and seeing, what's there to offer you. As well as other tribes that have implemented data management systems. They are a huge asset when trying to find systems that are out there. When you can speak to somebody else that has a system that says, oh, hey, we have this system. It worked really well for us. We wish that it could have done this, or we wish that we would have thought about this. You learn a lot from those people that have those data management systems right on. But not only, and I think this is with the entirety of data management, not only is it important to start from the beginning, thinking about your data management system, what you want it to do for you. Think about, how it can make your life easier. What reports can it run for you? What forms can it automatically generate that will save you from having to do that process on your own? There's so many things that you look at. There's so many things that you have to consider when looking at your data management system. But starting in the beginning, you make that list of what you want it to do for you. And that's, again, I want to go back to those partners, those people, those key players at the table. If you're going to have a data management system that works for multiple departments, what do they need it to do for them? How does that look? What does that interchange look like, especially if you're going to be uploading data to somewhere else or that type of thing? So definitely from the very beginning, making a list of all the things that you want done for you. And I know from experience with Cherokee Nation, when someone comes at you and they say, hey, what reports would you like for this data management system to pull for you? It's hard to put that into words or put that into paper, just being asked that question when you've not had something to go from. If you've had a data management system that hasn't done that for you in the past, or isn't currently doing that for you now, it's hard to know what you don't know. And so I always look at when we talk about, data management systems and getting it involved, this is your envisioning phase. Think big, think about everything that you could possibly want a system to do for you before you even start reaching out to those systems.
Thank you, Summer. Kimberly?
I would agree with Summer. I would do it immediately. And regardless of whether you have applied for the Title 4E planning grant or not, I would definitely get started on that. It's a long process. And unfortunately, at least in my experience, there's no one size fits all. All of the systems, even if it's the same program or software, it's going to look different for your tribe than it does for my tribe. It may work the way that you want it to work and not necessarily work for us. But Summer had a good point, calling other tribes, asking them what they use. I suppose there are some tribes who may have the ability to fund a completely homegrown database, and that's great. But you still need to think about what it is that you need and what is it that you want to look like. But definitely start that immediately. Don't wait until you're approved for 4E. Don't wait until, it's right around the corner, you want to do reimbursements, or even if you have a pass-through agreement, you may be using an Excel system, which is what we were using, basically Excel and database. Those were the two systems that we used, and moving to an actual database software program was a lot for staff. Most of them have never used one before. So it was a difficult transition, but it is possible. It is possible. And you need to think about, training staff on how to use it and how you're going to transfer data. And so the sooner the better, definitely.
All right. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Kimberly made me think of that, especially when you're talking about training staff, the sooner the better is such a good motto, because once you decide on your system and you get it, there's always going to be tweaks, stuff that needs to be worked out, kinks in using the system. And the sooner that you have that implemented, the sooner you can have staff working in that live real time and find out those things that are going to be, that need to be tweaked or worked on. And I would always say too, Kimberly, I don't know if you ran into this, but regardless of whether you choose an outside data source or you have something that your tribe develops for you, language is different when you come from child welfare versus when you're a computer programmer. You speak very different language, and it takes a lot to really get to that point where you are understanding each other, and that understanding is what helps move forward. So I found that a lot in church. I came on board and I was like, what do they mean? Like, what are they talking about? Because I'm a social worker. Like, what is this? So really getting that commonality of language between the two and understanding what is going on, it's so important so that you can move forward and actually get out of the system what you are wanting and needing for your agency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think definitely about the shared language, I always, when I start work with a state or a tribe, I always say, like, I don't know what you don't know. So any question you have, ask it. Don't be afraid to ask and think, oh, everybody else knows the answer or whatever, because I guarantee if you're thinking the question, probably half of everybody else is thinking it too. So just being open about, like, this is not where I come from, so I'm going to ask questions and hope that they're asking you questions too, because they're IT and not social workers. So, having that interaction is really good. Thank you both. The last question in this section is, who can you call for support and technical assistance? Which, Kimberly, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So definitely first, I would say other tribes. And it would be helpful to talk to tribes both kind of on both ends of the spectrum. So tribes who have found a data system that works for them, it's implemented, people are using it. And also tribes that are sort of in maybe the same spot that you are, looking for a data system, because they will all give you different options and thoughts about where you want to go and how you want to do things. I have my own thoughts about our data system that I would be happy to pass along, things that work, things that don't work, other types of software systems. Once you get a software system, you don't necessarily know that much about others, but you know a lot about the one that you're using. So definitely talk to tribes. And also we used Capacity Building Center for Tribes. So Cheryl Montoya was part of the team that worked with us at Kenaitze to talk about, like, what do you need? Like, what does it look for? And those kinds of things. And that was very helpful. And of course, having individuals who have worked on databases before on the team was very helpful. Child welfare, as Summer said, is a whole different kind of topic, and a lot of IT, finance, and others look at it and go, what? What does this mean? What's a placement? What's a removal? How are they different? So it's good to have those folks at the table too. But those are the two definite starting points that I had.
I would
Summer?
encourage also, when looking for data management systems, look for systems that, I know that was one thing that was important to us, is if we needed support or we needed a change, we needed someone to walk us through something that was going on with our system, what what did the different data management programs have to offer? Did we have some that were, available 24/7? Did we have some that we could just pick up the phone and call? Or did we have some that, they had to, when we were researching ours, there were several data management systems that you could request a change, but it couldn't be done for 7 months or 8 months. And that's important when you're looking at, when you're forward thinking into what your data management system will do, especially when you get into actual reporting to your AFCARs, and that it's important that you can get that stuff adjusted and done quickly. And it was for us. And so we were looking at data management systems that were, they were accessible to us. They were there and available when we needed stuff done, and they would sit down with us. If it wasn't in person, on a phone call, they would sit down with us, and we could have those discussions like Kimberly was talking about. If it's not recording placements, or we need it to do this, and what that actually means, and what data blocks within our system needed to be updated to reflect that. And so forward thinking into what you want your data management system or your data management company to provide you as well is important.
Thank you. And also, David and I, we work for the Division of State and Tribal Systems. Typically, we get involved with tribes after they've implemented the system and they have an approved preprint. But we are here, and we have a lot of resources on our website, which there is a link to some of our resources down below, and there's our email addresses are in the webinar as well. But we're always available to try to help answer questions or point people in direction to certain technical assistance that we have created over time. So we're here as well to try to help. So please feel free to reach out to us as well. So that's the end of the first section. I do see there's some people who put some good comments in the chat. Does anybody else have anything to say that maybe we didn't cover in this section that they want to add to this conversation? Okay. So the second section is, how do you understand and plan for the program's long-term data needs? So the first question under that section is, what data is relevant to day-to-day practice? So I may have lost track of who went first, but I'm gonna go with Summer on this one.
Sure. When we started looking at what data was relevant to day-to-day practice, that was our starting point. That was, what we like to, when we started training on our data management, what we like to tell our workers was good case practice. That was that day-to-day information that we needed. Placement changes, what they look like, where they were placed, what type of placement it was, those things, entering your case notes and what that was going to look like and how they could be accessed and that sort of thing. So we looked at day-to-day practices as a starting point, and then we considered everyone that was going to need data from our system all the way up to AFCAR's reporting and what that was going to look like, the demographics of the child and the placement providers and that needing to be in there. And also just looking at how much can our system accommodate? How much can our data system accommodate? And were we going to look at a point where we'd have to look in the future at changing data management systems again, and those type of things, those real important things that you have to consider for future use. Because we were at Cherokee Nation, we were at a point that our current system that we were using before we updated, it wasn't usable anymore. I mean, it just wouldn't do the things that we needed it to do. And so we knew that that was something that we wanted to explore with new data management systems, is were we going to get to a point that it was going to become unusable, or what that would look like. So that was something that we began our thoughts and considerations with.
Kimberly?
I would agree with Summer, definitely starting from the caseworker's point of view, because they're the ones who are going to have to use it every single day and probably every hour of every day. So you want to make sure that it's accessible to them and makes sense. So you don't want to have to put, a case note one place And this kind of case note goes here. We visited the child. Well, that kind of case note goes there. It has to be worker friendly. Otherwise, one, your team is never going to understand it and they're not going to use it. And then that's kind of useless, because if you're not putting any data in, you certainly can't get any data out. The other place to start with just day to day is looking at the things that you already need. So for example, my director here at Family and Social Services has to report each month to our tribal council about what's happening at with the children in our care. So she needs to know how many cases we have open, how many are ICWA cases, how many, we call them China cases, child in need of aid cases, how many guardianships, so on and so forth. And how many new cases there were, and cases that were closed, and all those kinds of things. So we really looked at what we needed now, what the things that we were doing now, and seeing that, and also supervision needs as well. How does a supervisor know that the caseworker is actually doing what they said they're doing? They said they went on visits. Well, how do I know that? Or what happened at court? The other thing to think about too is capturing data, yes, for AFGARs. If you're going to be a Title IV agency, you got to be compliant with AFGARs. But also, what happens if your caseworker goes out sick for a week or two? We actually had 2 individuals who were out on medical leave for like weeks at a time, like 2.5 months. And suddenly it's, what's the status of their case? Where do I find that? With Excel, you had to find the paper file and kind of put it together. With your data management system, you can look at it and kind of see like where things are at and where you want them to be. So that's where just the thought process kind of starts, is, what do you want out of the system and what do you want to keep track of? As Summer said, you want to know where your children are at, how are they doing? Are they in school? What are their needs? Those kinds of things. And maybe you go paperless and maybe you don't, but that's another thought.
Absolutely. So what data is needed to monitor the quality of services? Kimberly, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So that one can be a little bit more complex, but I think that goes back to the supervision, what the supervisor would need to know or the director would need to know. It can also be, how quickly children are reunified. What are some of the goals that you have for your department? So if you want to say, we get a lot of ICWA inquiries, and it is our goal that those inquiries be responded to within 10 business days. Is that happening? Is it not? How am I going to know that? We get requests for, from the state of Alaska, we get requests for diligent relative searches and supervised parenting time and all these kinds of things that we can get reimbursed for. So how do we keep track of that? We want to use our data system to do that, so that we don't have to hand count, how many did you do this week? How many did you do that month? And try and remember. So those are things that I think once you have goals set for your workers or for your supervisors or for the department, then that will kind of dictate the data that you need to keep and the information that you need to pull out.
Summer, did you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah, what Kimberly said, like we had our agency's overall goal, the safety, permanency, well-being of our Cherokee children and families. And that was our goal every time, regardless of the data that we wanted our system to produce. We knew that that was our end result. And we began with kind of like a tier system. We had different departments, but we had what we called our super user within our data management system. And they kind of knew every section of our data management system. So it wasn't just specific to workers in one area. And so when I say tier system, we started with the worker. What does the worker need to do their job well? And what does the family and children need from the worker? And then we went to the supervisor. What does the supervisor need? What reports are they responsible for? What do they need to monitor to ensure best practice with their workers? And then on up to managers and directors, and up to tribal council. What does tribal council need from our agency and our department? And how would we get that information? And I think that was one of the things combined with our super user, and when we had those meetings, when we were deciding, what data to, the day-to-day data and practices that were needed, we met with the individual that was responsible. So if we were looking at that worker level, like what they needed to do their job well, and what the children and families needed, and what the supervisor needed from the worker, we met with workers. And then when we were looking at supervisors, because a lot of times, we try to get management involved in decision making, and there are times within, agencies that our management is just a little bit far removed from what is actually going on in the field, what is really needed in the field. And so we made sure and had those discussions early on with the staff that was directly impacted and reflected, and moving on up, and then having that super user from the beginning to the end. So we didn't just have someone that was really good at foster care that knew the foster care section, and someone that was just really good at the CPS section that knew CPS. We had that super user that could work a case from entirety, from beginning to initial involvement with the family, all the way to removal, if that's what it resulted in, to reunification. I mean, we had that super user that was familiar all the way across the board that could work those things, which ensured that we had someone that we could go to at some point and say, what's going on in this area? How do we ensure that this area of our data management system is working best for our agency and for our staff?
Okay, thank you. So the next one, I think we kind of talked on a little bit already, but what data does the program need to report? And I think we kind of talked about that a little bit, but if you have anything, Summer, that you want to add?
I think just making sure that you think that continuum, that large scope, starting small. What do we need in our agency? What do we need in our program? To what do our federal partners need? What do we need to continue and ensure sustainability of the program that we're trying to implement and run? So we continually thought, even though we weren't actively speaking with our federal partner on AFGARs and what was needed, we knew we had a general idea of what was going to be required of us. And so we had that in mind each time that we started looking at what does our program need to do. And so when we were searching for data management systems, we had a really solid idea of what we wanted it to do for us. Plus, we looked at data management systems that were AFCARS compliant already, that had worked in AFCARS. So we didn't have to start from the beta. It wasn't on our shoulders to explain AFCARS to our data management company and what that looked like.
Absolutely. Kimberly, is there anything that you would add to that one?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered it.
Yeah, okay. So the next question is, it's about exploring the types of systems that are out there. So Kimberly, can you talk to us a little bit about your experience when you started to look at what was out there?
So at Knightsey, they had their data system before I started. So I didn't get any input into how it started. I can tell you that we did not have everybody at the table when we started, which resulted in a lot of confusion because there was not the understanding of how much modification we would have to make for our child welfare and for the way that our department within Knightsey actually works. So for example, we came to a point where we said, okay, I think we got all the data points and how it's working. And then we learned that perhaps other departments could see some of our data. So turns out that wasn't true, but those are things to think about in terms of looking at data systems. What can it do for you, what it can't do for you. Having a demonstration from the software company is important. Also, if you can use your tribal partners or ask your tribal partners to do a demonstration for you, like show you a dummy case. We have one created or a couple created in our system. So if someone says, hey, Kimberly, like, how does this work? I can show them a dummy case, make all kinds of changes, make it look really goofy, create errors, because then you can really see how it works. We were sold on a system that could just work for the whole tribe. And honestly, it works in a lot of ways, but not for the entire tribe. I mean, we have a health system, we have an education system, tribal enrollment, tribal court. It just can't. And so it's really important to know what the system can do, as well as, do they know what Title IV requirements are? Our data system software company said they did, but we've educated our data point person at the software company and educated him greatly. He is now very aware of all the child welfare terminology. He has learned everything that's going on. So it's very important that they understand, as Summer alluded to before, what is Title IV-E? What are the things that you need to know? And if you're not Title IV-E, just in general, like, what does child welfare need? What is it that you're looking for? I think is very important, and having those deep conversations with people beyond the salesperson. I would talk to the people who would actually be helping you implement at the company if you could. I think that would be important, because the salesmen, they have a lot of good information, but they're not the person you're going to call when you've got trouble, updating a drop-down field.
All right, thank you. Summer, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
Kimberly made some really good points. I would just add that I know when we searched for our data management system, we wanted a data management system that that gave us the capability of making changes and updates, like Kimberly said, actually talking with those people that are going to be the ones that work for your that help your agency, not just the salesperson. I think of an instance when we were with Cherokee Nation. I mean, we were getting ready for implementation and rollout, and we had become so consumed with getting everything done that there was a portion of our data management system that we hadn't even focused on that was pertinent to moving forward. And our data management company at the time was like, okay, let's have a meeting. Come up here. Let's sit down. Let's see what is needed, and when's it needed by, and what's it need to look like, and we'll get something going for you. And so really just knowing what you want your data management system to do for you, and what those people are able to, how quickly can we make changes if we need to make a change? How quickly can updates be done? How many updates a year can we have with our data management? What is it going to cost for those things? So considering all of those things when looking at, the systems that are out there, and like Kimberly said, really relying on those demonstrations. That's when you really see that system and how it's going to work for you. And then your other tribal partners, that have had systems that work for them, like Kimberly said, what does that look like? What can you show us? What things can you think of that you wish your data management system could do for you that this currently isn't? Or what are some things that you wish you would have implemented it that you hadn't? That really, really exploring what's out there and what can really work for your agency.
Yeah. And, and I think too, it's important to look at, and that's where you bring your IT people in so that they can really help you look at that. But you made a point about, how the system can grow over time. You know what your needs are today, but what are your needs tomorrow, and how can that system meet those needs tomorrow? And so there's different ways that systems can be built. They can be custom built for you where you own the code. They can be a commercial kind of off the shelf situation where you're licensing the code, and or there's kind of a hybrid where it's maybe built on a platform. And so there's lots of different options. And so, like, what does that maintenance and operations look like? Does your tribe have the capacity to take on maintenance and operations? Are you going to be relying on the vendor through the licensing agreement for maintenance and operations and making those changes like Summer was talking about? I think that is a great example of why bringing someone with that IT knowledge in early on can help you answer those questions and really look at the different types of technology, not just the front end functionality, but what's the technology it's built on and how does that function for you and your tribe. Thank you for that. So the next question, I think we did cover pretty much. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to section 3. And this one is about how do you identify IT constraints and supports, which we've kind of talked on a little bit here. So I'm going to read the 3 questions that go under this because I really feel like it's kind of a conversation like all in one. But it's, how much support can the tribal IT staff provide? Can you host data or on tribal servers? and then the broadband capacity and other infrastructure issues, and how you consider all of that when you're in your planning phase. So I don't know, Kimberly, do you want to take a stab at that one?
So this is another reason to have IT people at during your at your conversations when you're talking about these things, because there are issues with regard to, for example, do you have people working remotely from the office, away from the office? If you're in child welfare, probably, right? Can they access the system when they're working remotely? Can't they access the system? What is that going to look like? Do they even have, capable internet? I know my folks live in Wisconsin, and their internet service is slower than molasses. So you want to think about, like, what is the capacity, or do we need to build that capacity and identify those kinds of things? And I think Lisa mentioned too that understanding where the data is going to be housed and what your internal staff can do. I'm essentially the person who makes changes to our program in terms of drop downs, updating those and changing things and all those sorts of things. I'm kind of the only person who knows how to do that here. Could our IT staff do that? They could, but they haven't really been trained in that. And you don't always want to have to rely on the program folks at the data company, because they may not be available right away. You may need to change right away. So that's something to think about, like what kind of capacity that you have, not just in IT, but in other programs as well, so that you can make those changes when you need to. Definitely hosting the data is important. You, as the tribe, want to be able to have control over that data. Understand that and make sure that the company understands it as well, which means put it in writing. Because you definitely want to have control over your data. So if you have to transfer data from an old database to a new database, which they call mapping, you want to be able to take that information and put it into the new system. Unfortunately for us, that wasn't an option, because everything was in Excel, and it didn't really work to be able to do that. But something else to think about too is how the current data is going to get into the new database system, and who's going to do that. I'm one person, I don't, I suppose I could work 100 hours a week, but I'm not going to. So think about how long that's really going to take as well, because that could take quite a while to bring your information technology up to be able to support whatever data system that you choose.
Thank you, Kimberly. Summer, unless you have something additional to add to that one, would it be okay if I direct question number 4 to you? Okay. So we're going to go to question number 4. How do you plan for implementation / change management? How do you prepare staff for the change and how information is documented? I'm sorry. How do you plan for staff training, planning for QA, and ongoing support and maintenance?
This, in our experience, this was an ongoing process for us. We made sure that we had staff involved from the beginning to the very end, and meaning that when we implemented a new portion of our data management system, like, we educated staff right then. This is what's coming down the line. This is what it's going to look like. And before we actually went live, we were able to really work in our data management system. And when I say before we went live, I mean before we actually started with direct Title 4 claiming and that kind of stuff. We actually were able to really work in our data management system. And so we were able to see the things that, any issues that came up, or things that we would like to see differently, or that might work better for us. And we were able to write that, document that process and get with our programmers and, make those changes before we were actually in our live system. So I think that was one of the things. It's just really training your staff and allowing those little small incremental changes that come up. Let them work with those changes. Let them explore those changes. Let them play around with it. And that way, when you're actually in your system and it's working for you, you've got all your data moved over, it's mapped over, you're ready to go. Your staff is confident and assured of their capability within the system, because getting a new data management system is scary in itself. So why not work to make sure that you can kind of counteract some of those fears with giving them the knowledge that they need, the confidence that they need to know that they can operate in their system efficiently, that they can't break anything that can't be fixed, and we know who to contact if things need to be changed or updated for us.
Just to interrupt for a minute, there's a question in the chat. Is there a list of vendors who provide data software services specifically for tribal programs? Oh, and I
It looks
see
like-
Cheryl
yeah.
put the answer in. You answered her right when I was reading it. We do have a list. It's pretty short right now, but we share it when requested. Anytime we hear of a tribal program using a different vendor, we check it out. Oh, great.
And the email addresses to everybody here today are going to be provided at the end of this. So, feel free to reach out and ask those questions. Thank you, panelists, for all of the great information that you shared today. I think we're going to move on to kind of the wrap up here.
Well, thank you for all of that. The first thing we want to make sure folks know is that we have 2 more upcoming webinars in this series. Procuring a Data System is on Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. And then the last in the series is called Contracting with Data System Vendors. And that's Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. And be sure to register for those as well. Here are some resources. We'll put these links in the chat. The Tribal Information Exchange, the site for the Children's Bureau, Federal Guidance, and the AFGAR's Technical Assistance. If you'd want to share in the chat what resources have been helpful to you, share that with us and with everyone else, so we know what is people are using for resources. So also in the chat, as we develop resources and webinars, if you could let us know what topics or additional information would be helpful to you, and it not just about data, but any topic, we'd appreciate that information from you too. And lastly, we have an evaluation. This QR code will take you to an evaluation to give feedback on today's webinar. And as promised, Lisa promised, there would be the email addresses for all of the folks that you heard from today, should you have any questions. I wonder if we can put those in the chat, huh? We'll put those in the chat because you won't be able to you won't be able to copy and paste from that slide. Well, thank you, everybody. Any final words from our presenters?
It looks like, Lottie, did you have a question you want to ask? You need some information. Okay, well, I would suggest that you email, you can email me or any of the participants here today, and we can try to help you figure out where the resources you need to get the answer to your question. And that goes for anybody here today who didn't ask their questions or wasn't able to get it in. Please reach out to us and we'll help you figure out who to talk to next and where to get the resources you're looking for. Your question is about budgets. Okay. I have other questions before I can know where to send you. So if you want to email me, I'm happy to have that conversation with you, and we can jump on a quick call and try to understand what your need is and then figure out where we go from there.
I think we have another question that maybe we have time to answer. Would you please ask whether there are any states who have tribes that share the CCWIS system for payments only? I don't know if that's something you want them to email you about or just answer
So
now.
Roz, I would say if you want to email me as well, and we can try to direct you. I don't know the answer offhand, but I can reach out to the other federal analysts on my team to help answer that question. So you can email me as well. And please, everybody, take the evaluation. Let us know. We really would like these to be as helpful as possible. So please give us your feedback on how this went. If there's other topics you'd like us to cover, we would love to hear from you guys. And thank you all today for your participation today.
Thank you, everybody.